You thought I'm dead and done. You'll know for sure tonight. I'm rising from my shallow grave, and I'm holding my switchblade tight, 'cause you can blast me with dynamite, but I won't rest in pieces. I'm a revenant, baby, and I'll be back. It's gonna be one pale morning, all middle of the night, when I come round to take your life. I know it will feel alright, 'cause you can bury me underground, paved over for good measure. I'm a revenant, baby, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Be sure to watch your six. I'm out with the boys tonight, and if we see your cheating face, well, you're in for a fight, my darling, 'cause you can try to drown me, babe, but I won't sleep with the fishes. I'm a revenant lady, and I'll be back. He's a revenant. 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 Watch out now! He's a revenant. I'm a revenant. He's a revenant. Let's go now! All right! He's a revenant. He's a revenant. Hands off! I'll be back. I'll be back. I'm a revenant. I hear her alright while resting my eyes, like a sigh in the night, like a maggot in the pie. She's calling my name while I give it a try, like a thin veil of rain, like a sip of fine rye. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. She's calling my name under dusty black sky, like a beast to be tamed, like a stamp on my thigh. I hear her all night with my eyes wide open, like a whisper in the dark that makes my belly burn. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. I'm a softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. Softy, softy man, but she'll take me back. I got nowhere to hide. I'm a fraud and I'm a hack, but I won't be taken aback. City lights, so far away, on a trip or a long holiday. Take a drive downtown without a care, 'cause you're high, I wanna be there. I wanna be there. City stars, pretty at night, sparkle softly, gems in the sky. I know you see them, I know you know that I love you wherever you go, wherever you go. City winds, blustery and cold, touches everything, makes it feel old. But you want me, always discreetly. You complete me, and I never wanna let you go.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, and perhaps even good evening. Thank you so much for dropping by and joining me for a very chillaxed and spontaneous session about introduction to rigging in Daz Studio. It is wonderful to see you. We have a full house. Usually we don't have these large crowds on Daz Plus stream, so it looks like it's a popular topic. Thank you so much for being here. X201, thank you so much for the great tip. Countdown mail. I think that's a new thing that Daz were trying out to get everyone on the correct time zone. But yeah, if there's a bug in iOS 15, I will certainly let them know for sure. So thanks for bringing that to my attention. I've only got iOS something else, I think, which is why it doesn't show up. Actually, I didn't see the email on iOS at all. I saw it on my Mac, and that worked pretty well. X201, thank you so much. Nico is here. Rosie's Jim is here. How is Rosie doing? Jeff from Southern France, how's it going? Trevor from Swindon, it is wonderful to see you. Swords for Two could make it. The Web Soul from the Netherlands. Mickey Mouse from super early morning in Australia. Wonderful you could make it. Mr. Dan, Mr. Logan, Mary. This is just wonderful to see you all. So rigging is a complex subject, and I thought we're going to broach it from multiple angles several times, and we're going to take it really nice and slow. So rigging isn't actually that complicated, but it's one of those things that is shrouded in mystery. So some of the things that we'll be doing is something along the lines of this. So this is a simple box I've made in Blender. It's nice and metallic, and it has a bone here that lets the lid open and close. I was going to say I've rigged that wrong, sorry. The idea was that the lid was indeed going to close, demonstration effect. So I'll show you how to do that. There's another thing I can show you. What a shame it doesn't work. We could fix it. I'll show you how to set this up from scratch. There's also something like this that we're going to make that will deform organic shapes here, so that when you, not like that of course, but if you go and select one of the bones that we're going to put in here, it would go and deform the whole organic shape. And I'll show you how to set this up from scratch so that you know how you can add this to existing products, or in case you're making products, you can go and build these things in. It's really not that difficult, but it's one of those things that's shrouded in mystery. So it's, rigging is extensively used, of course, on our Genesis figure. So if I go and take this away and just as an example, load my Genesis 9 figure in, we just have a quick look at how that works. We deal with rigging all the time as a user, but we usually don't set it up from scratch. And this is what this, wag the tail, yes, this is what this session is all about. And there it is. Hello, Genesis. How you doing? Very good to see you again. Always good to see you, really. So when we click on our Genesis figure with the regular universal manipulator, somewhere you can see all these little boxes appear here. And when you click on an arm, for example, this selects a part of the figure, but it doesn't select the root node of the figure. It does in fact select a bone. And usually we don't see these bones, but they are visible and we can see their effects. And this is what we kind of use rather casually. When we just move these arms, the geometry kind of magically moves with it, and we'll have a look at how that is made. So if ever you wanted to display the bones and see what they look like, there's a tool for that in Daz Studio called the Joint Editor tool. It's this one here with the little pencil there. So if you switch that, then you can see all these little bones that are in the figure. And bones are really, it's a concept that goes back in 3D quite a while. They are essentially a helper skeleton that'll help explain to the 3D app what needs to be moved where. So really the bones aren't really the thing that makes the deformation. The bones are attached to what's known as face groups, and they are selection groups on your 3D object. So this bone would correspond to a particular polygon selection of the mesh. And then when we as users move the bone, the underlying program, be that Daz Studio or Blender or Maya or whichever other application you use, knows which polygons to then move. So that's the basic concept. But so these selection groups, they're a little bit like surface groups, if you will, by which I mean that a polygon on your object can only be part of one group or the other, but it can't be, there's no polygon that can be part of multiple face groups. Selection sets can do that, but surfaces can't do that, and by extension face groups or vertex groups can't do that either. So a polygon is always associated to one face group or to no face groups, and by that implication it can only be bound to a single bone, not to multiple bones, as far as I know. Full disclosure, I'm not a an expert in this, of course, but you know, this is something that I've picked up over the years, and I thought we're going to have a look at that. So what makes it slightly more complicated is that we have the geometry, that's like the 3D object. Then we have the bone that kind of sits in there. The bone then controls what's known as a face group, which is the polygon group that is being moved. But then we also, on top of that, have something called weight maps. So those are kind of three things that are working in tandem there. The bones, the face groups, the vertex groups, face groups, and the weight maps. And the weight maps are there so that the deformation that occurs from on the edge of one polygon to another isn't going to be so abrupt as it causes distortions. So the weight maps let us paint something in where we say, hey, when you move this joint, I'd like an influence to be really heavy here, but a little bit lighter on that side. And by extension, there's this concept of the triax figures. That is something that Daz employs on figures like the Genesis figure. You not only have one weight map for the general bendability, so to say, you have in fact three weight maps, one for each joint rotation. So that hence triax, 3 axes. So that's kind of the basic concept. And before we begin, let me show you where to find all these things, and then we're going to go and create something bendable from scratch, and totally in Daz Studio, nowhere else. And then later on we're going to move over to Blender and create something slightly more exciting there. So with this tool selected in the joint editor tool, if you open up your tool settings tab, you can see interesting properties here. In particular, you can see that this joint here, left thigh, just completely out of just randomly picked, the left thigh that I've selected here is associated with the selection group called L_thigh, but I could in fact change that. So you see the node here, that is what the bone is associated with. This is what I select in the scene tab, and this is here the selection group under the hood. That's essentially the portion of the geometry that is being moved by this bone. But I can change that if I wanted to, and you know, cause all kinds of havoc. You shouldn't do that, but when we set up our own objects, we may have to. So this is where that is set. If you ever wanted to see the groups that your object has, you can go over to another interesting tool that we're going to have to use, which is the geometry editor tool. That's this little guy up here. Its tool settings change, and it will now display a lot of other properties about our figure. One of them is the face groups here. Blender calls them vertex groups. It's the same concept. I can close this down. Underneath it, we have the surfaces. So once again, different types of surfaces. And then underneath that, we have regions. And then we're not going to worry about regions here. And then underneath that, we have a fourth type of selection set, which is in fact called selection sets. And all of these are different types of groups you can set up on a 3D object. So surfaces we're kind of familiar with. We even have that surface selection tool that when we select it, we can see where these surfaces are. And face groups are also selection groups. And the one that I had here for the left thigh, that is somewhere in here, probably. I don't really know where. I don't think there's a way to really search for it. But yeah, this is where all these things are hiding. So like the left forearm, this is now this part here, or the left foot, that's now this part here, and so forth. Left pectoral, that's this part here. So it highlights in red what these regions are. And those are all associated with bones, and the bones can then do deformations to the figure. So the Genesis figure is a really complex beast. So we're going to start with something extremely simple before we move on to rigging kind of a humanoid type figure. So on another thing I need to just quickly get out of the way before we get going with the face groups here, each of these bones also has a weight map associated with it. And those we can see on a third tool that we need to look at, which is this one here. That is the weight brush tool, the node weight brush tool. If you select that, then you see that depending on the bone I click, you have something like a general weight, and you can see what that weight map looks like. So red means a lot of influence, blue is less influence, there's also green, and gray means there's no influence on that. And if you go and select through this, each bone, you can see which bones have weight attached and where that weight is. Like here, the left thigh doesn't have any weight maps painted on at all. And it's a little bit difficult to kind of understand how you see these things, how you visualize these things, which is why we're going through this multiple times. So right now I can see this because I have the bone selected. I'm on the weight node brush tool, and I'm also looking at the particular weight map that we're using. So if I click off that, then sometimes when you switch over, you don't actually see anything. Demonstration effect, now you do, but sometimes you just don't see anything, and you're thinking here, why is that? It's because the weight map you're trying to examine doesn't actually show up here. Some figures have more than just general weights, but that's the one that we're going to be dealing with. So let me just go and bring up a brand new scene, and then just we'll just rig a little plane that we can bend like in 2 or 3 places, and we get the hang of rigging from scratch in Daz Studio. Let me ask you this, so who here has done any rigging from scratch before? Just out of curiosity, any of you have done any rigging? Julia's going to put a little poll out. Please let me know what your experience is with rigging. Do you have any experience setting up rigging? Do you have no experience? Or have you tried and failed? Please let me know. I'd be very interested about that. WebSol, yes, there is. In fact, there is forum thread in the Daz Plus forum section. It's a pin thread, and it's called, I think, the Stream Archive, and you can see all past live streams that we've done just for Daz Plus. Have you ever done any rigging? And that can be in any application, not just Daz Studio. You know, if you're familiar with the rigging process, then please let me know. Very interesting to hear about that. Yes, we don't have a proper watch page for Daz Plus streams yet, but hopefully it's going to come at some point. While you answer the poll, let me just go and quickly rig something up. I'll go and create myself a new primitive here, and I guess I'm going to make it a plane just to keep it really, really simple. And we're going to make it 1 meter. That's cool. Divisions, I might make that 3, so that's going to be 3 by 3 divisions. Or should we make it 9 divisions? 9 divisions. Is that going to be too much? Nah, 9's good. 9's good. And we're going to make it so that it stands up like that. It's not standing up, is it? Dang. I was going to make it stand up there. So let's go and do that again. New primitive plane, and we need the Z positive. Perfect. There we go. I'll go and just move it just above the ground here. And I'll also go and switch over from filament into my wire shaded view, just so that I can see the geometry that I have here. So what I'm going to try to do, this thing obviously doesn't bend. It kind of rotates around its center point here, but it currently doesn't do anything else. What I'm going to try to do is put 3 bones in here, one at the bottom so that this edge here can bend over, and then I'll put another bone into the top here so that we have 2 bending points at which we can bend the plane. That's the plan. Let's see. Oh, so 63% of you have no experience according to the poll. 14% have tried, and 25% of you have done some rigging before. That's cool. Very good. Excellent. Thank you for letting me know. So in Daz Studio, the process is a little bit different than in possibly in other applications. But what we need to do first of all, before we start, is we need to go and set up our face groups. Currently, if I go to my geometry editor, I can see that I have one surface that's called default. That's basically everything. And I have one face group that's also called default, which is also everything. But I can't associate all of that with bones. So I'm going to go and look at it from maybe the front, like so, directly from the front. And I'm going to go and create the 3 rows at the bottom. I'll make that into face group, and the 3 at the top. And then we have the 3 in the middle here. So to do that, let me go and paint this on. I can either just go and paint this like that. Can we see this? Is this a bit, let me go and change just the color for presentational purposes. Let me go and make that a little bit blue here. There, that's nice. So now we can see the selection a little bit better. So all I did here was use the current selection tool, which is a polygon selection tool. And then I can just go and drag over the bits that I want to select. There's various other ways of doing that in Daz Studio. You have various types of making these selections, but I'll leave it for now, just like that. You can also, there's drag selections and types of things. There's here on the geometry selection, you can pick how you want to select. You can also grow your selection and all that. This is the selection type, that's polygons, edges, or vertices, and the selection mode. So this is like drag, selection, lasso, and marquee. So if yours doesn't behave like this, right click and examine the selection mode. So I'm using drag selection here. And now I can either right click and head over to geometry assignment, create face group from selected. And I'm going to call this bottom. And then it has created this new selection up here for me under face groups. Default is still there, but it was 81 polygons before. Now it's 54, so it subtracted my selection from that. So that's what I meant when I said one of those a polygon can't be part of multiple face groups. So that's how that works. If we do that again, I'll just go and use the top row here now, like so. Right click, geometry assignment, create face group from selected, and I'm going to call this one top. Then we have the bottom and the top, and we have the default, which is everything that was left over. All of them is 27. That's perfect. So in order to rename that, I can double click this and call that middle. And now I have 3 face groups that are kind of aptly named what I'd like to do with them. Are we clear so far? Does that make sense? Hey, Biscuits, how's it going? Right, yes, I've never been able to do that either, Biscuits. You can do it bone by bone, but multiple bones, select him. Yes, I don't think I can. I've not been able to do that either. Yes, good point. WebSoul makes a good point. You need to be logged into the forums, and you need to be a Daz Plus subscriber to see that page. That's very important. It's Trevor. I'll forward it. I'll forward it. So once we've done that, let me go back into perspective mode for now, and let's start adding bones to our object. So these are the face groups, but currently, if you look at the scene tab, this is just a regular object. So this box icon means it's just a regular object. So in order to turn that into something that has bones, we need to head over here to edit, object, rigging, convert prop to figure, and that will then turn it into that icon that we're familiar with the disclosure triangle that you can open up, and it'll ask me a couple of pertinent questions here. You can either use a triax weight mapping system. We don't really need to do that. We're going to stick with the general weight mapping. The difference is that this has 1 weight map and this has 3, actually multiple, but general will only have 1 by default. You can add others later, so not to worry, just general is good for now. Click that, and that has turned this icon here into our figure icon. And it's also given me 1 bone. That's just called bone, and we're going to go and rename that in a second. And to see those bones, I need to come out of my geometry editor and go into my bone joint editor tool. There we go. There's something that I've made a mistake here. I haven't selected the correct bone rotation. So I can change that, but this is this one here, the bone rotation order. And that's a little bit of a complex thing to understand. See if I can undo this. Can I? I can't. Yeah, yes, can I? No, I can't undo it. What a shame. It's undone my selections now, probably. What a shame. I was going to just do this again, but hey, no, this is all good here. Yeah, so bone, let me just see if I can change it. So the rotation order is a little bit difficult to understand. You've got this menu, and it doesn't really mean much if you don't know what it's all about. It's the way the bone is pointing in 3-dimensional space, and it's a notation that we're not exactly familiar with. But if you look at the first letter in this setup, that is where the bone would point in our setup. So if it starts with Y, it means the bone would be pointing up. that's a good start. If it's an X, it would be pointing left, right, and if it's a Z, it would be pointing backwards, forwards. That's number one. The next two letters, we're going to talk about this a little bit more in detail later. The second letter is the axis in which the bone is most likely to rotate, and the third letter is the axis in which the bone is least likely to rotate. In reality, trial and error kind of gets us there. So I'm going to just leave it where it is, Y, X, Z. So it looks like I'm pointing up, and this is kind of what I want. So I can see these two little things appear here. In fact, we've just uploaded a video to the Daz channel that explains how to change pivot points on an object. And this is kind of what we've been talking about there as well. We've got this red manipulator and a green manipulator. And if I drag them apart, then I can see that the bone is growing out. And that's kind of what we want. So this bone's pointing upward, but had I chosen a different joint rotation, it would be lying flat. So this is what I want. This is good. I'm going to drag the green one to the very bottom because that's kind of the root node of my object. This is the pivot point around which my object is going to rotate. I'm going to bring the red guy down to about here where my selection finished. So this is the bottom bit that I'd like to dedicate the bottom face group to. But that's only one bone, so currently nothing rotates around anything. So in order to now create another bone that extends over from this endpoint over to somewhere else, I can go and right click here and say create child bone. There's two options here. You can have a child bone that would be a bone that is hierarchically underneath the current bone, or you can have a sibling bone which is hierarchically on the same level. So a child bone example would be like from my shoulder, my upper arm, that would be a child of the shoulder, and then my lower arm would be a child of my upper arm. But if you think about the hip with two legs attached, the two legs would be sibling bones of the hip. So they would both be parented to the hip, but one isn't parented to the other. They're both parented to the hip. So I'm going to go and create a child bone here. And once again, I'm being asked about the joint rotation or the rotation order. I'm going to follow that of the first bone here so that they're all in one line. Otherwise, one goes up like this and the other one goes to the side. So I'm going to use YXZ. YXZ. And I'm going to give it a name. There's a name and a label. So I'm going to call this one middle because that's what it is. If I hit tab, then the name is being taken across to the label section here. Bone rotation, and boom, there we go. It's magically chosen the correct position to end. So I think it just looks at the previous bone size and just duplicates that. It's kind of good for us. And now we're going to go right click again and create another bone, which is another child bone. And this one's going to be the top. And then the rotation order, once again, I'm going to follow this so that all bones are in the same order here, because that's what we need here. I'm going to use YXZ. Perfect. Boom. Awesome. So at this point, if you needed to make any adjustments, then go ahead and do that. You can use the red marker. That's always the end point of the bone, and you can move that around, and the green one is the beginning point of the bone. So now all that remains to be done is rename the bone that we got by default here, which is just called bone, and I can do that in the scene tab. So I can go and double click on this and call it bottom rather than bone. And now bones are named correctly. Got bottom bone, middle bone, and we've got the top bone. But if I were to try and rotate any of these things now, nothing would work. I mean, the bones rotate, but nothing else happens. And that is because the bones don't know about the face groups yet. And that is the next thing that we need to associate when we do manual rigging. There's a convenience tool that I'll talk about a little bit later called the figure setup tool that infers the bones from face groups that already exist on your object. So if you had a complex organic form or something like a robot thing that we're going to build, like a little tin man, then it'll be very cumbersome to set these things up in Daz Studio, and usually the modeling application already has better tools for that. Well, so to be honest, I don't know. All I know is that the first letter is the axis in which the bone points. And that's kind of, you know, that's what I want. If I wanted to change this over, I can do that. I mean, if I wanted to change these bones over, that is possible into different rotation. But I think I'm just going to go leave it as it was, because I really don't understand the implications of the next two letters all too well. That's kind of the rule that I read about, but in practice, you can always change it around if the description on the rotational thing isn't quite correct there. Let's have a look at how these bones are connected to the weight group. So the top one that we're currently on, at the top here, it says selection group none. That's not what we want. So let's change this over and tell it to be associated with the top face group. Then the next one, the middle bone, I'm going to go and associate that with the middle face group, like so. And then the bottom is currently associated with nothing, so I'm going to associate that with bottom. And now they all match. So it's a simple object, but if it's a complex object, this would take quite a lot of time. So one of those things. Bottom is bottom, middle is middle, top is top. So now when we go and try to rotate our top bone, it's still not working, and that is because the weight maps aren't set up right now. So the bones are associated with the correct face groups, but they don't move because the influence isn't set correctly. And that's where we need this other tool here now, which is the node weight brush. So if we switch over to that, you can see that we have general weights here on our object. And if you go through the bones one more time, then you see top is gray, so that means there's no influence over that. Middle, same thing. And bottom is completely red. So currently the bottom bone influences the whole object and nothing else. And that's why the middle and the top bones didn't work. So an easy way to fill those in would be to right click on your object, and then under weight editing, you can use fill by bone selection groups, and this works because we've just set it up. So that's kind of the beauty of it. You can select this, you can paint the weight maps in as well with brush tools, or you can make selections and then fill them, and there's smoothing tools and all that. But just to get a basic, make the face groups follow make the weight maps follow the face groups, you can use this. So I right click on here, and then under weight editing, fill by bone selection groups. And when you do that, we can see something like this, which is kind of cool. So now the bottom bone only takes care of this area, the middle only takes care of this area, and the top only takes care of this area. I believe this is painted on a per vertex basis, by the way. So now if we go either get out of here and go to our rotational tool or to our universal manipulator, or we just use this, then we can see the thing is actually bending kind of exactly where we wanted it to be. And the middle also is bending, and it is also basically just like forward kinematic, moving along whatever is parented to it. So it also moves the child along with it. So that's kind of cool. That's kind of exactly what we want. And that's in a nutshell really how rigging works. So you've got the object has the face groups are associated with the bones, and then you have the weight maps that tell the object how much influence every bone has over which area, and that is then what triggers the change in the OBJ. That's how that works. You can also do other things. You can, do kind of crazy weird things. So that is where playing with the parameter dials comes in handy. So if we didn't want a customer to do this with our object, what we'd have to do is, even though it looks kind of cool, it's like, NFT it immediately. What we need to do is we need to lock the rotational dial so that this doesn't happen. Let me just go and undo this, and I'll show you where and how to do that, just in case you ever wonder, hey, why do some objects not even have these dials? So I'm still in this, I'm using the pose tool for this, but if I were a regular user and I'd be using the 3D manipulator here, I can now go and select portions of my object, just like we know it from the Genesis figure. And if I go and select my parameters tab, under rotation, I can also use these dials here. So if I go and use the top, I use X rotate, then you know that also works. But we might not want the rotation dial to go all the way to here. You know, we might want to leave it here by -90, from 90 to -90, for example, if I don't want it to bend all the way down here. This is where I can set up limits. Other things like the Y rotate and the Z rotate, I might not actually want for these things to work at all. And that is where you'd go onto these sliders and just go and disable them, lock them. So you could head over into edit mode here, select these sliders and say, first of all, we lock those. Then we go and hide those. So hidden, hide selected parameters, and then we don't have these things anymore. Likewise with rotation, if this is an object that you want to sell, you can go and hide the translational sliders, because otherwise, you know, you could do things like that. So by default, this is all possible, and this might be useful for certain objects. But again, if you don't want that, you can either lock them or hide them. In case of the rotational limits, you could say, like, click this little gear icon here. Under parameter settings, you then say, well, my minimum is going to be -90, whoops, and my maximum is going to be 90. And now the object's only ever going to rotate from here to there, or rather the slider is only going to allow that. That's a really simple example. I think we're going to do another one just a little bit faster with the cylinder, and we can see what we can do with weight maps, just so that you get an impression of what they do, because that's kind of difficult to show on this object. I suppose I could try, because currently we get this really sharp kink here at the top, but we may not want that. I might want for this not to be so sharp. I might want for this to be like a bit of a more organic bend. So actually I can show you on this object. So this is something in which we would tell the weight map, hey, I don't want you to be, I don't want you to have 100% influence. I'd like you to kind of fade out here and leave this part of the object kind of alone, so then we don't get this sharp kink. We will need some extra geometry, so we'll see if it works here. We'll see if it works. That's an interesting question. Are bones transferable to another object? Well, there is something we're not going to discuss today, and that has to do with the rigging of clothing. So if you have an object like a shirt that goes on top of the Genesis figure, then the shirt, to be conforming clothing so that it can move with the Genesis figure, is also rigged. But you wouldn't set this up from scratch. There's a tool for that in Daz Studio called the transfer utility, and that looks at a donor figure and then looks at the shape of the target object and then transfers the rigging that way. So this is how clothing creators make a pair of jeans, model it around the Genesis figure, then transfer the rigging, and then when you move the leg of the figure, Daz Studio looks at that joint rotation, that joint movement, and applies the same thing to the skeleton in the pair of jeans or in the item of clothing, and that works. That kind of bends with it. That's why that works. So yeah, transfer utility is the way to go. But it doesn't work between arbitrary figures. So it doesn't work between arbitrary figures. It'll always look at if you have object A and object B looks pretty much like that, then Daz Studio can infer the rigging. I've never tried it out with things that are not clothing. That might be a nice idea, isn't it? If you had a rigged box and then you have another rigged box, and just say donor object is rigged box, target object is whatever J just made in Blender, see if the rigging transfers. It's not so much a second skin, they're more like a second figure. They're fully, if you'd load the trousers in by yourself without the figure, you could go and pose them just like you would the Genesis figure. So rather than them being a second skin, they're more like a follower object. I think that's what we call them. And that's true, Logan. Yes, indeed. Let me see what happens if I go and smooth my weight maps out, and we'll see what it looks like with this object, and then we're going to sub-D it so that we infer more polygons, and then we'll see what that looks like. So with my weight node tool selected here, I can see this is what it looks like. I can go and first of all select the top box here, so I can go to geometry selection. So it needs to have a selection for that. Geometry selection, select by face groups. I'm going to select the top here. Then you can see it change, and this is essentially the selection of my brain. Hello, weight map. There we go. And if you go and right click that, you can go and say weight editing, smooth selected. You could fill it with a different value as well, but smoothing it would essentially just literally smooth this bit out where the changes are. So weight editing, smooth selected, and it's a kind of hit and miss. I'm going to go and type in 10 and 50%, see what happens. And then this happens. So if I go and deselect my object, just so that we can see that we can see the colors now, we've got a little bit more blue on the bottom, and red is still at the top, but it's getting more blue towards the bottom, and as a result my bend is smoother. So the influence of the weight map is now fading out towards the bottom there. So if I do that one more time, if I wanted to smooth it more, once again you have to select it first. If I go and smooth it now, editing, and just smooth select it, nothing is going to happen because nothing is selected. So this only works on the selected polygons. So you can draw them in with the geometry editor as well. That also works, but we can just select them from here. So select by face groups, top, and then we go and editing, smooth selected by the same value, and now the bending is even less. So this is how I get my curve. And then if this is still a little bit, I'm going to do it on the middle as well here. Middle is completely red still, so I'll go and say selection, clear selection first of all, and then we go select by face groups the middle, and now we go to editing, smooth selected, and maybe we'll go 20, so we go the same way. Now the middle is also smoothed out. If I go and bend that back, and then the top kind of forward, yeah, this happens. If you had more geometry, it would bend even better. To kind of visualize that with our geometry, it'll work all right. I can go and select my top figure here and head over to Edit, Object, Geometry, and convert it to sub D. So we're implying more polygons on the fly. And we can see the bending is a bit smoother now, especially if I increase the level of subdivision, say from 1 to 2. But even better bending and more controllable bending you would get if you'd have more face groups and more bones on your object. So if you wanted this to be more like a nice curve, you'd put like 5 bones or 8 bones in, and then, you know, that's how you do that. So very cool. And you can do exciting things with this because it means you can either add rigging to existing things that don't have rigging, or you can add rigging to stuff that you've built by yourself. So imagine a cupboard that would need a door that opens. That would be good. Or like a chest that needs something that needs to open, or even something like like a car door, or maybe you've made something like a cute cartoon type animal and you want to rig the tail of the animal. I've actually just uploaded a video to the Daz channel in which I'm explaining how you can use controllers to dial in multiple rotations at the same time. So that's another concept here. If we were to, let me just go and undo all these rotations here. Bottom doesn't have any. If I like the idea of the middle and the bottom, the top and the middle to be kind of curled, so if I do this and that, so that's basically 2 dials. So it's a relatively simple adjustment. But if you had a tail and it has 15 or 20 bone pieces and you made a really intricate shape, or imagine hair that has a ton of adjustment bones and you've adjusted them, so you've paused them all, spent half an hour putting them into a position that you think, hey, that could be windy left. If you wanted to save that out, you can use a controller to make that happen. So there's a video on the Daz channel. Thank you, Brian. Awesome. That's exactly the video I was talking about. Just to reiterate that here, if you wanted to add that to the top node of your object here, or maybe under transforms, I'll put it, or maybe misc. Misc is a good one. I'll do that. I head over here into edit mode, create myself an empty property, and I'll call this one bend baby, for example. And that's kind of all good. I'm going to go and create that empty property. Oh, there's one thing I've forgotten, and that is that I don't want this to go into the negative, even though it might actually look kind of nice. So we'll leave it as it is for now. And now on this dial here, I can go and right click and choose ERC freeze, and that will now look at anything that deviates from the default value. So I'm just going to go and look at the X rotations here, not the bone positions. So don't use everything for that, just use the values that you need. Hit accept. And then the sub D has been switched off. That's just something that, you know, Daz Studio likes doing, so we can switch that back on. But then under MISC, we have this bend baby slider now. And if I go and bend that from 100%, it goes back to 0, like so. And it also goes into the negative. So it's kind of, now I'm adjusting multiple rotations with a single slider. So if you have an object that would require that, where you adjust multiple bones, then, you know, that's how you can do that. So kind of cool. I like the idea of expanding what you already have in your, indeed, a wind sail. That's right, exactly. That's what it looks like. And you can then go and animate this as well. So if you needed to, if you had a fish and you think, hey, that fish is a static object, it has enough geometry, but I really like its fin to, you know, do this during my animation, then you can just set up a little bit of basic rigging, 2-3 bones, and then just go and animate this. And, you know, it's possible. So it really extends the usability of objects that are already in your library. Kind of, I like it. That's it. Show's over. No, I have a few other things, you know. Oh, I know. It's at this time of the day. I do have a few other things. And the thing is really, practice makes perfect. So this concept is just tricky to understand. These whole things like this, the object has the face groups. Somebody needs to create the face groups. Then you have the bones. The bones need to be associated with the face groups. And then we as users move the bones, but the 3D app doesn't really care because it kind of uses it slightly differently. The bones are really there for us to understand where the movement flows. So one of those things. Right? Isn't that cool? Let me show you. Let's do this again, actually, because in fact, do you want to do this again much quicker with the cylinder, or do you want to look at a practical example of maybe building something like a treasure chest that opens up a lid, something like that? I'll leave it up to you. I think we could probably do with just explaining this one more time, a little bit faster, just so that we're all on the same page. Or you can also rename that. It goes and says figure plane. So I'm going to go and call that, you know, magic, or maybe what did you just call it? Wind sail. There we go. I'll call this a wind sail. Wind sail. There. And I'll go and save it. I think there's something else that I've forgotten to do that's on the joint editor tool. I think if I go and just do that, I think I can go and memorize the figure rigging. That isn't that important here, but if you've moved a lot of bones into new positions, then this is important, because otherwise your bones will reset to the positions before. So let's do that. It's another good thing to get into the habit of. There, wind sail. Cylinder first. I like it, Jeff, because it is kind of it is relatively quick, and it is just like the practice that makes perfect. Or I have questions. Also, do not drop the questions in the chat. I will totally look at them. Let me go and make the wind sail invisible here. Should I make it invisible? I'm gonna, no, it's different scenes. We have a different scene here. And we'll go and start again from scratch. So I'm in my wire shaded view just so that we can visualize the topology. And I'll go and create myself a new primitive to begin with, and then we're having a look at how we set up these face groups in Blender. So Blender calls them vertex groups, Daz Studio calls them face groups. There's different applications have different names for the same thing, which is, it's a little bit of confusion there. Practice again, awesome, 53%. And time to make something in 15 minutes, we'll do that. So go cylinder, and I'm gonna go and use maybe a 1 meter cylinder, 20 centimeters is good. Segments and sides. So sides is like how many sides it has on the outside, and then segments, how many tall segments we have. Maybe we'll go 12. We'll go and make 4 bones. So 12 by 12. Let's see what that looks like. Yes, and it can. Let's lie it flat. I think that's kind of cool. Let's make it lie flat. So first thing, and did I make that calculationally possible? Then if I go and look from the left here, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I can go 3, 3, 3, 3. So I can have 4 face groups here, and it'll be 4 bones in this. That might be cool. I'm just thinking we could have 1 bone in the middle that sticks up. That's just our main bone that doesn't really do any deformations or isn't associated with any face groups. And then we can make the left and the right arm bend down like this. I think that might be cool. I built one of those things once that used to hop through my overlay. I don't know if I still have it, but that's maybe we should do that. Let's try that. It'll be different bone rotation altogether. Okay, so first things first, with the object in question, we set up our face groups first. Let's do that. So the easiest way to do that is to start from the bottom here, and we do that in the geometry editor. Tool settings, geometry editor, and I'll go and select the whole bottom face here. These are my current face groups here. If I look from the front, it looks like that. So I'm just going to call this one left. This one's right, and this one's left. Let's do that. So I go and hit Control plus to grow my selection like that. So the way I did that, sorry, I didn't quite explain that properly, did I? So I'll clear the selection. I've marked all the faces at the bottom here, and then there's a command here. If you say geometry selection grow selection, that's the command I'm using, and the keyboard shortcut is Control and then plus on the numpad, and that'll do that. This is going to be my right face group here, let's call it. Right click on it, and then geometry assignment, create face group from selected. Outer R, I'll call it. That's that. Then we have the same thing here. So once again, select that, grow, assignment, outer L. And this is now a little bit more tricky. I think we can, there's a loop selection, isn't it? If I go and select loop, yes, we can do that, perfect, that loop, and then grow, and then we have this face group here, which is going to be middle L, and what's left over by default is going to be that, so that's going to be middle R. Perfect. So this is that. We don't have an exact middle bit, but hopefully we can kind of make that happen when we turn this into a rigged object. So let's see if we can see if that works. I haven't done this before, so let's see what happens. You'd rather rig the lottery machine. Nate, that's actually, it's a joke we've been playing all week. We should really, if I had the skill, we should build a lottery machine in Blender and then rig it up. And maybe we can, you know, we all win the lottery. Wouldn't that be good? The root bone, yeah, we're going to have a root bone, Logan, but it's not going to be associated with the face group. So let's try that out. We go and say, edit object, rigging, convert prop to figure, general weight map, and boom. Okay, figure cylinder. Awesome. So we have this bone, and I'm going to call this one, I'll just call it root. We could, on a figure, it might be called hip or something like that. I didn't even look at the bone rotation, though it kind of points in the correct way. That's kind of what we want. I might actually point this, I'll put it at the, I'll make it a bit smaller here. Just like that. And this bone isn't going to be functional, really. I'm going to go and create a child bone from this. And its rotational, well, what's its rotational property now? I'm gonna say it begins with a Z because that's the blue axis, but I can't really tell you if it's gonna be ZXY or ZYX, to be honest. I'll just use one in one direction, one in the other. I really don't know what the difference is, to be brutally honest. If we had, yes, that's exactly how I'm going to do it. Exactly, this bone isn't going to have, isn't going to be associated with a weight group. I'll show you how to do that in a sec. Let's go and create this child bone, and this is going to be ZYX. Let's try ZYX, and we're going to call this one middle left. Ah, there it is. This is kind of not really where we wanted it to be. We can, I suppose, we can put the root node. We can put the root node to the bottom here, and then make the middle point basically the middle of that. That is possible. And then middle left can just go and begin here, and kind of end about here. Whoops. Middle left, make you end about here. And we're going to go and create another child bone from here. And this is also going to be that. And it's going to be outer left. And that we really want to start kind of here. I believe there is a way to auto align the bones as well, so that also works. And we have this. That's one thing. So now, once again, from the root bone, we're going to go and create another child bone. And this is going to be middle right, I think. And here we're going to select ZXY. Does it work? Totally doesn't work. Yeah, as I said, that is something I still have major mysteries with. I really don't know what the second and third letter are really about. But I don't think it makes that big a difference unless you're doing, you know, rigging as a professional rigger, I think. Create child bone from this, and that's going to be outer left, and that's also going to be that. So here, all right. Right, indeed, yes, exactly right, Logan. That's totally correct. So now, with all my bones selected here, I can go and say outer left. That's up here again. Outer left is going to be outer left. Select that. Then here the middle. Did I name these correctly? No, it's the right, isn't it? This is supposed to be, sorry about this. This is outer left, we have that. Outer right. Duh. got left and right confused, that's all. Now it's outer right. It's outer right needs to be with the face group outer right. Then we have the middle right. That needs to be the middle right. There we go. Then we have outer left, which is this one here. That needs to be outer L. And then we have the middle left, which needs to be middle L. But then also we have our root bone, and our root bone is selected to no face groups. This is how it exists, and it needs to be there as a root bone, but it doesn't really have a function other than give us essentially the pivot point of the node. So with that out of the way, let's go and head over to our weight maps. Have a look at the weight maps. Everything is on the root bone, not what we want. We've got the middle, outer, left and right. I'm going to get rid of the selection here. And right click and head over to weight editing. Fill bone by selection groups. And that should be outer right, middle right, outer left. Oh no, that's, yeah, outer left, middle left. Perfect. So that's all those weights associated. So now we should be able to bend this thing, right? I'm thinking middle left bends like that. Yes. Outer left bends like that. Yes. Middle right bends like that. So we don't really have a middle bit. I suppose we could benefit from like a section that you know, that just has that's just, you know, what's it called, like a fifth segment in the middle. I could have totally made that happen, but I didn't. So now it bends, and it bends all over the place. So it also bends in other directions like this. We can give it a funky color, look at it in filament and all that. It's all kind of good. Let's make it blue and metallic. I like that. Then we can see it a little bit better. So make it a little blue here. We're bending things. And this is plastic, so we'll go and head over to base and crank up the metallicity. Nice. Maybe a little lighter. Oh yes. We're going places. Maybe it's a bit too shiny. And then we'll smooth out the weight map, and also give it a bit of subdivision. That should all look kind of cool. Glossy roughness. Crank that up a little bit, like so. Ha! That looks stylish. Add a bit of subdivision to that as well. Geometry sub D. There we go. Oh, nice. Okay, smoothing the weight maps. Let's do that. So with my weight editor, I don't see the segments now, but if I go and say geometry selection, select by face group, I'll just go top to bottom and middle left, and I'll say editing smooth selected. Smooth it all. Have you even smoothed it? Oh, we don't have weights. Oh, because I'm on the wrong, duh. There we go. Did you smooth it? Now you smoothed it. Perfect. Perfect. Select by face groups. This one here. Oh, and I need to clear the selection as well. So once again, selection, select by face groups. This one. And then smooth the selected. Like that. Nice. Cool. Organic shape. And I haven't even left Daz Studio. Isn't that cool? Isn't that exciting? So when you do these things, you got to clear the selection here. This is all right click on there. And then the next one is selection, select by face groups again. So outer left, editing, smooth selected. You can set up shortcut keys for that as well. Well, the outsides looked actually quite nice without the smoothing. Clear selection. Control D I've set up once in Daz Studio for that, because it's just like it is in Photoshop. Outer right, editing, smooth selected. Boom. Okay. Brilliant. And now we can go and rotate to our heart's content. see what other funky things we can come up with. You can also go and paint these things in. That basically, if this is too harsh a kink, you can go and say, well, don't bend it there. So that's something else. I'll let you explore that by yourself. I've done it. It's fun. It's really fun to have objects like that you can play around with, and you can be proud of yourself that you've done all this by yourself. Bend me, shake me, any way we want. Is there one bone to rule them all? Do I save this? Yeah, let me go and save this, and then I'll show you how to make a little chest of drawers maybe that we can open just very briefly in Blender, and we can also see how to set these things up in Blender. And then after that we're going to go and build let's call this one blue, or bendy blue. How's that? Bendy blue. There, perfect. And then after that we can have a look at rigging a humanoid with the figure setup tool. So I may overrun today a little bit, but I hope that's okay. So this is Blender 3.4, and I'm going to model a really simple chest, and its whole purpose is that it has a lid. I'm going to do that from the default cube, so the poor guy isn't going to be deleted. I'll just bring this up. I'll scale it in the X a little bit so that it's kind of, this is our trunk here, something like that. Maybe I'll scale it down a little bit. I can do that by rotating, well, scaling around my 3D cursor, and then say SZ, make that maybe a little flatter here. Perfect. It's like some kind of a trunk chest thing. I'll go and apply the scale and head over into edit mode with tab, and I'll go and inset this face here with I, like that, and then I'll go and bring this down. So with E, Z down, and it's kind of, I don't want it to protrude through the floor here, but something like that. So that's the bottom, nice and easy. Now to make the chest, I think the easiest way to do this is to just select the bottom face here, duplicate it with Shift D, enter, and then GZ to bring it up to just somewhere here. And this is now got the normals on the other side, so I'm going to go and rotate this around, RX 180. I'm sorry, I meant to switch this back to the bounding box center, RX 180. And now the normals should be on the correct side. So if I look at that, I'm going to go and GZ that down a little so that we have a tiny gap between the lid and that. And that's kind of our lid. Give it a bit of volume by saying EZ. There. Looks a bit like a freezer, doesn't it? Perfect. So that's really all I need for my object. I have a lid that separates. So if I'm in edit mode and I'll select all these linked faces, well, I could probably just select the back end here and go and snap the cursor to that selected object, and then I can go and rotate around the cursor with L just as a demonstration. If I go and say RX, then this is the effect that we want inside Daz Studio. So often what modelers do is that they model that they bring in their objects open so that it's kind of makes bone placement easier. It doesn't matter, it's personal preference. I can export it like this, or I can go back to that. Either way will work. The most important bit in our modeling application, so that we don't have to do it on Daz Studio, is to set up our face groups here in Blender, and that is also done in edit mode. So Blender, as I said before, calls these things vertex groups instead of face groups, but it's the same thing. And so at the bottom right, you've got this kind of flux capacitor icon here, and this is in edit mode, by the way. If I go here, then you can see that we have vertex groups, or like nothing at the moment. We also have shape keys. That's kind of morph targets, so we don't want to deal with that. But the vertex groups, that's something that we currently don't have any. So if I go and hit plus, Then I create a group, and this is one of the face groups. I double click to rename it, and I'm going to call it lid, perhaps. And then I need to assign it so that this is now associated with the lid. So if I go and unselect everything with the lid selected, I'll hit select. Then I can see my lid is being selected, which is cool. So then we need to do the bottom. So in Blender, hover with L, and then all the linked objects are being selected. I'll create another group, and I'll call it trunk, maybe. Trunk is good. Trunk. Once created, assign, and that's that. So now we can go and select this or select that. And when I export this, then those vertex groups will be exported as well. If I enable this on the export, I'll call it trunk, like it's the magic trunk. Go out of edit mode with this object selected. Let me go and export that out as wavefront OBJ. Blender has two OBJ exporters at the moment. This may be different in the future. This is the legacy one. That's the one that's written in Python. This one is the one that's written in C++. It's a bit faster, but the options on export are a little bit different. So if yours doesn't look like mine, make sure you're using the new one and not the legacy one. And I think this was introduced in Blender 3.3. So if you're using a version before that, then you may only have one, which is going to be the legacy one. Just, something to keep in mind. I'll put this in my rigging demo folder. And I will call this one Magic Trunk, perhaps. Call it trunk. So, and then here in the export dialog, I'm going to just export the selected object, which is the trunk. But then slightly further down here, materials we haven't set up. We're not worrying about that in this session. I need to tick vertex group. So this is important. If I don't enable this, then my vertex groups aren't exported and Daz Studio can't pick it up. So very important. Always tick export. And then inside the Daz Studio, new scene, let me go and import our masterpiece and see magic trunk. And I'm using the Modo scale here so that things from Blender come in roughly at the correct scale. Oh, there we go. Massive trunk. Awesome. It's huge, man. But it looks pretty much like we left it. And the magic now, if I go to my geometry editor tool and have a look at the face groups, there's my lid and there's my trunk. So this is exactly how I've set it up. So if you have a complex object, it's sometimes easier to do this in the native modeling application, only because they usually have easier selection tools. So at this point, we could use the figure setup tool, I think, but it's just, it'll be overkill. So since it's a really simple object, it's much easier to set this up the manual way like we have done. And this is how we would do that. With my object selected here, I'll head over to Edit Object Rigging, and I'll say Convert Prop to Figure. And now I'll use the general weight mapping again. And I haven't looked at the, I haven't looked at the bone rotation. I should have done that. Let me switch to the bone editor and see what our bone looks like. It just points up, so that's good. That's good. I'm thinking it's probably good to position it to the side so that at its end point, that's where we're bending it from. So I was lucky that YXZ was working. If the bone would now be lying flat, I could still move the red point to the end of where I want to create the next bone. But it's one of those things, if you do this a lot, then you'll kind of get a feel for what does what. But it's, I say, practice and see what you think. I'm going to go and move my green manipulator over here. So this is where perhaps my model has this. So the endpoint here, this is where my model has the hinge, like there. And once again, this bone doesn't do anything at the bottom here. That's just lurking around to give us the the center point of our figure. I didn't have to move it. I could have left it directly in the center. Would have also totally worked. Oh, well, that is using the transfer utility art painting. That's a bit of an art in itself. Fugazi and I, as well as Chris and I, did some sessions in which we did that. And we brought him some clothing from Marvelous Designer and set it up so that it would work with the transfer utility as well as deforce. If you get something where, say, you ran transfer utility and you move a leg and the leg goes through the clothing and the clothing doesn't move out of the way, then that's usually an indication that the weight maps are not set up correctly. There are some templates that you can choose when you do the transfer, especially for Genesis 9. It's been greatly improved, that transfer process. I would suggest try it with a different template or use the none template and see if it still happens. And then compare the versions. Have a look at the different weight maps. Like, do it once with template A, then once with template B in the same scene, and just have a look what is different between the weight maps. That's what I would do to fault find. Just as an aside there. That's that. Let's go and create a bone. This one is probably going to run Z. So first letter Z. I'm going to go and keep that in mind. Right click, create a child bone, and then we'll go and say start this with the Z. Perhaps ZXY, perhaps ZYX. I really don't know. And we'll call this one lid. Boom. Okay. Lid bone looking good. So from the left, I'm going to go and just for my understanding, just move it here. It's not strictly necessary to move this because whatever the bone looks like, it's just a visual aid for you, the artist, while you're setting this up. The real heavy lifting is done with the selection groups and the weight maps. That's that. With our bones, let's go and make sure the lid bone is associated with the lid face group, and the bottom bone, which is just called, bone, we'll go and rename that to trunk perhaps. Trunk is set up with the trunk. That's perfect. Now we've got it. So since the bottom isn't really moving, I can leave that intact. Head over to the weight brush tool. On general weights, we see that everything is on the trunk and nothing's on the lid. To alleviate that, right click, weight editing, fill by bone selection groups. Lid is now correctly mapped. If I try to use lid opens. Awesome. So now it's just a matter of, well, first of all, memorizing on the bone selector, the joint tool, memorize figure rigging, so that all these things are essentially, they're not zeroed out, but they become the new defaults here. You see that they're now gray no matter what numbers are in here. That's what that did. And now it's just a matter of making sure that on the lid here, on the rotation, we probably don't want the lid to do that or that, unless, it's a magic lid. So let's go and head into edit mode. These two, let's go and lock them, and then we hide them out of the way. If ever you want to bring them back, this is here on the parameters tab, preferences, show hidden properties. They're still there, they're just grayed out. Now that they're locked, they can't be adjusted even if you see the hidden properties. And now that they are locked, users aren't really, hopefully not going to find them and unlock them. So that's that. And we can do the same with the translation while we're here. So back in edit mode, these things, translation, we're just going to go and hide them. Hide. There we go. So the only thing that we have left is the rotation, and it isn't looking good in regards to the limits. So 0 is good. And then we're going to go and say either minus 180, or you may want to leave it so that it can flap on the ground, but then you got to make sure that this is accounted for in your model. So you don't, in this case, I suppose the construction of my particular trunk wouldn't, if the hinge would literally be on here, then it wouldn't really pop on the ground. But if you had a little gap there, then that is something that is, I guess, possible. But we're going to say 0 to minus 180. That's our limits. Dracula, good idea. This is the perfect Dracula coffin. So minus 180 to 0, and then we can do that. Perfect. So now, if you don't want this to be called X rotate anymore, and you want this to be, I don't know, under the general tab, you could just go and change this, so the label from X rotate to lit open, for example. And then instead of the path here, if you don't want it to be in general transforms, you can maybe add it into your own subsection called adjustments, perhaps. Did you spell that correctly? So general adjustments. It's a good idea. Hit OK. And then rotations don't even exist anymore, but a new category called adjustments does. And that is now where users can open their lid. The little practical example. Let me see if I have any questions up until now, because the next item on our agenda is to build a kind of a very simplistic stylized biped and in Blender, and export that out and use the figure setup tool to infer the bones from multiple weight groups, so that we can, see if you had a custom figure that you wanted to bring into Daz Studio, how that would work. I may just give this a little color here, because white on gray, it's just so trist, isn't it? There. Mauve, maybe mauve, maybe a little bit rougher, like that. Perfect. Even better. Maybe a little darker. There. Jay's chest. $14.99 in the store. Okay, fine. It's free. Okay, fine. It's not for sale. Jay's magic box now with color. Color, that's an add-on though. Too funny. Let me have a look. Right, biscuits, thank you. Okay, so yeah, it's the logic behind the letter rotations, right? It's the logic behind it. A leg would first bend and then twist. So we see this on the figure setup tool. The little dials that currently on the basic rigging are just called rotation XYZ. They're going to be called something different. They're going to be called something like bend and twist. And those descriptions, they're kind of, I suppose they make more sense when we infer the bone groups. Good point. Thank you. I think everything else we've discussed, which is good. Let's go build that Tin Man. Have I got a scene? I'm going to go and call this Jay's Magic Box first of all. Have I got something along the lines of what we're going to Jay's Magic Box here? Perfect. Did I save my previous project just to show you the kind of thing we're making? And if not, that's also fine. It's really easy to build from scratch. In fact, let's just go build it from scratch. I'm going to go and use Genesis 9 as my kind of reference, if you will. So let's go bring in the dev load, and all I'm going to do with that is in the A pose, I'm going to look from the front like so, and all I'll do is render this out so that I have bit of a reference against which I can put my primitives into shape with Blender. So I'm not even going to do that in iRay. I'm going to go to render settings, and then up here I'm going to, instead of engine iRay, I'm going to switch this over to viewport. So that will save out whatever is selected up here. So in my case, that's filament. And then the size doesn't even matter either. 1200 by 1200 is also good. I'll go and hit render. Boom, there we go, perfect. that is nice. So I will put that into, do we have references? I think I have that already. References. I'm going to call this one G9 front. We have it. That's perfect. I thought I did this already. G9 front, and with Genesis selected, I'm just going to turn them around by this way. So -90. And now I'm going to go and render this out again. Perfect. G9 side. And we have it all as well. Perfect. Good stuff. That's all I'm going to do here. And now we don't really need Genesis anymore. And can delete that out. So back in Blender, I might just save that as well while I'm here. And this is, that was on the desktop under rigging demo. This is going to be Jay's magic box. I'll create a new scene, and I might actually leave the cube. No, I'm going to delete the cube. Cube's gone. In fact, everything's gone. There, completely empty scene. Let me go and bring in a reference image. You can do that by literally just dragging it in. But I didn't know this either. That's another little tip that I've learned a couple of weeks ago. Very cool. So under demos here, and it'll be rigging, it'll be references, and there's G9 front. So I can literally go and left click and drag this into the Blender viewport, and then that'll just appear there as an image, which is exactly what I need. So I'm going to leave the size as it is. I'm just going to go and grab this and put them in the middle as good as I can. Like so. And now I'll go and do the same thing with the other image. So GY, just put him back. And now I'm going to go look from this side and do the same thing and just drag that into here, since it has the same size. It's just a really vague, rough references. This is kind of good. So GX, put that back to here. So now I can go and, oh yeah, crank down the opacity a little bit. And on this one, I don't want to bore you with the details, but this is how you might model something from scratch. And we're going to go and look from the front and then go and bring in our little objects here. And I'm thinking we can just use cylinders for that. So I'll just put a big cylinder for the chest piece here, for the trunk piece. We can have a pelvis. Maybe we'll do that. We have a pelvis, then we have a cylinder up here, and we have a sphere for the head, and we have two cylinders here. One for the upper arm, one for the lower arm, maybe even one for the hand, and then we have two for the, yeah, just like, you know, two pieces here. He doesn't have hands, and then we have two for the legs and one for the feet. I'm thinking, I know I killed the cube. I know, it's one of those things. Yes, X201. I'm trying to make my life a little bit better, save things. And then, you know, in a related thing, I'm trying to retrieve things if and when I need them again, because that's another one of those things. Maybe I'll go and make these unselectable. Oh no, I'll leave it. I'll leave it as is. Cool. So first things first. Yeah, I should have not deleted the poor cube. So the poor cube's going to come back. And this is going to be his hip. So just put that into place here. Oh, and I'm going to use this as the major kind of mirroring piece as well. So I'm going to try something called the auto mirror add-on. So SZ to make that a bit flatter. This is going to be just, you know, his hip here. Yeah, perfect. Great. So it's going to be my centerpiece, and I'm going to have the other pieces are just going to be loose, but I'm going to mirror them around this. So this needs to be absolutely vertical. Since I actually messed that up a little bit, I might just have to bring that guy in again. Sorry. I'm going to go and create a new cube. And when I moved him, I didn't constrain him to the x-axis. So that was entirely my mistake. So that I don't have to use a mirror modifier on this. So this is his hip, essentially. And we're going to do the face groups in a moment. For now, there's going to be the hip. Just so that I remember what that is. Base object. These are references, so I'm going to move them out of the way into their own collection. And this is like my Tin Man, as he's going to be called. Okay, so let's do the same for the upper body, which is going to be a cylinder. I don't think it needs to be all that detailed, so 32 vertices is probably a little much, so let's go and use 16 or even 12. 12, I like it. I know, Logan, it's crazy, isn't it? I think that's going to be good. So GZ to make sure we retain that in the absolute center here. GZ SZ. There's going to be a torso, buddy. Tin Man's torso. There we go. That's handsome. Now we'll use a sphere at the top. That's kind of, you know, that's what he looks like for now. We can probably make that a little flatter in a minute when we go to the side, but for now, kind of cool. Instead of a UV sphere, we could use an icosphere. That looks crazy. Or we could do another cylinder and turn it around like so. That might be good. Maybe we'll do that. Let's do that. Shift D. RY90. GZ. Nice. Can even detail him a little bit and turn him into Pyramid Head. Yeah, that's nice. This could be his head. I like it. Tin Man. Perfect. I guess he doesn't really need a neck as such. We can just, you know, that's fine. He just has this. We could put a neck in. I'm just going to keep it really nice and simple. For the arms here, I'm going to use. Let's start with the legs first. Actually, let's duplicate that cylinder again. Shift D, Enter, GZ down, and we're going to have an upper leg and a lower leg. And this isn't going to be in the center, so I'll just put that kind of into here, into that space, like that. I don't want it to turn into a lesson in Blender modeling, but you know, this is going to be one leg. And in order for that to appear on the other side, I can just use a mirror modifier down here. I can say mirror modifier. It'll look at the x-axis by default, but I need to go and make sure it doesn't mirror around itself. It's going to mirror around the hip object here, or the chest object. I don't really mind. So we can go and use this eyedropper thing, mirror it around the hip. So you know, don't worry about the reference. It's kind of, you know, the center pieces are totally in the middle. So now we have two legs. And the cool thing is, if I wanted to make adjustments on one, like maybe rotate it a bit, then the other one moves as well, and I don't have to do these things again. With that in place, I can just duplicate that leg and move it down, maybe scale this in a bit. SZ, those are the lower legs. And with that, we can do another duplication and turn that into feet. So Shift D. Oops. And we're going to call this RX90 for the feet. Look from the side and make that a little smaller. Something like that. Also maybe in the scale in the Z a little, because his feet are flat, and then we have feet. All right, awesome. Cylinder head, exactly. Did I hear that they're remaking Silent Hill 2? Did I read that somewhere? Because that would be sweet. I'm gonna make him a little slimmer. He's a little bit bulgy, so S and Y, just make it, just scale it in a tad like so. I think the head's already pretty much scaled in. We can't even detail that. I think I'm gonna leave it as it is. Let me go and grab this, actually this leg here, duplicate it, and that'll turn into just one long arm here. So Shift D, and then go grab that out. Thanks to the mirror modifier, we already have it applied. So when I duplicate that object, it always duplicates the mirror as well. It's not exactly 45 degrees, even though we could make that. So R45, or like a rather R minus 45. That's exactly 45. Kind of what Genesis is as well, isn't it? Now we could just give him unbendable arms, or we could give him an upper arm and a lower arm. What do you think? Upper arm and a lower arm with hand, or just a long arm and a hand, or all three of these things? Why is he a poor guy? Tentacles. Maybe we'll give him two types of arms here. So these are the upper arms. I don't want them to intersect, so I might put them a little bit higher, like so. Shift D, make them a little bit slimmer here. And then Shift D, those can be his hands then. Perfect. Okay, I think Tin Man is ready, and we can set up face groups for him in just a moment. So yeah, I like it. So this is our biped, and we're gonna go rig him up in Daz Studio with the figure setup tool. I love it. So, you know, based on Genesis 9, you'd hardly recognize him. Nice one. Very cool. So I'll go and duplicate the whole collection here, because just in case I need to get back to it. And this is just going to be called Tin Man. I think I'm going to select everything, shift select the hip bit, and actually go and apply all the modifiers. I wonder if I can do that on all these guys together. No, I can't, can I? But everything that has a modifier, can I apply them all together? If I do that, apply. Yes, looks like that works. I didn't know that. That's good. So there, perfect. So none of these have, no, they still have mirror modifiers. But I do have to do that manually. I don't know if there's an option to apply all modifiers, because now I need to have, in order for these face groups to be set up, I just need to make sure this this automatic double that Blender has made there, that just gets removed. So we don't have that. Anymore. Perfect. Okay. So shift select that and then hit Control J to join everything into one object. I'll call him Tin Man. It's not Toyn Man, it's Tin Man. And now comes the fun of setting up the face groups. So on really complex objects, often face groups and material zones are similar, or you can refine one into another, but this is really what takes so long on 16K skin detail. This is really what takes so long. Genesis 9.1, ouch. This is really what takes so long in setting these things up. It's often like that in graphic applications as well, that you have to create the correct selections that make sense. So I'll go back down here to the flux capacitor icon under face groups. I'm going to select the first one. That's going to be his head. No, actually it's going to be his hip. There we go. So since we're in edit mode, I can go and hover over his hip area, because now everything is one object here in edit mode. I hover over his thing, press L, and that's now going to be his hip. So assign, perfect. Ding. Maybe we'll go work our way through the legs here. So this is like, it's his left, my right. That's confusing. Let's call this leg L, perhaps. Leg L without any spaces in there. Assign. And then we have this one, which is then leg R. Assign. Then we have, these guys are shins here, I guess, at the bottom. So shin L, shin L, there we go, assign. Let me go bring this up so that you can follow along with what I'm doing here. Shin R, assign. And then we have foot. Shinel number 5. Shinel, I love it. You're so welcome, Biscuits. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate that. Always nice to see you. Number 5 is alive. Foot L, assign, and then we have deselect and say foot R, and that'll be this guy here, assign. How are we doing so far? Are we good on the select? Select, yeah, look at that. This is going well. He says as Blender spontaneously decides to crash. We've got everything up to here. This one's the torso. Torso, there's no L or R. Torso. Torslo, no. That's a town in Sweden, I believe, isn't it? The torso. And now while we're at it, we'll do the head. Did we assign the torso? No, see? Crazy. L, assign. Head, no neck. L, assign. Boom, perfect. And now we're going to have, this is his left, so this is going to be arm L. Was this how are we going to call this? Upper arm L, lower arm L, and hand L, right? I'm thinking. Janie number 5. Ooh. More to the point, what is foot lettuce? Do I want to know? Probably not. Upper arm L, check. Foot lettuce, this is the first I hear of it. Lower arm L, assign. Did we sign this? No, see? Dang, brother, that's cool. Assign. Did we sign this? No. Really? I forgot. Assign. Dang. Select. Yes. So perfect. Head, did I do that? Yes. Torso, did I do that? Yes. So now all that remains is hand R, L even, hand L, handle, assign, and same here. And this is upper arm R, assign. This is why what I meant by this takes so long. If this was an organic object where you have one object and you really have to think about which edge loop to select and how far you go out, this is going to take forever, really. But yeah, that's just how that's how the cookie crumbles, isn't it? Upper arm R. No, that's the lower arm. Lower arm R. Assign. Final item on the agenda tonight is hand R. Also, spell it correctly while you're at it. Okay, so this is now all our face groups. If we select all of them, nothing should remain blank. just as a little exercise here. Torso, head, upper arm. Sadly, I can't select multiple, or if that is possible, I don't know how. And then hand R is already like deselect, select. Perfect. Okay, this is magic in the making, I say. Vertex groups come out of edit mode. I'm going to go and save my Blender scene first of all. Tin Man number 5. That is going to be his title. That's the Blender scene. Now I'll go and export my guy out. Export as waveform OBJ into, in fact, OBJs. And we'll, Tin Man number 5 is good. Export materials. We haven't set those up. I haven't UV unwrapped him, but you know, that's something for a later session. Just know that if you wanted to rig something, it's a good idea to do the materials first before you do the rigging. And vertex groups need to be saved out. Right? Yes. Tin Man number 5. Okay, let me see if I can import him into Daz Studio, just out of curiosity, if it actually even works. Tin Man number 5 with Blender scale, or with Modo scale. Yes, look at him go. All right, perfect. Okay, let's rig this guy up. First of all, give him a nice little color here. Perhaps he's Tin Man, so he's going to be, you know, he's going to be metal. I like it. He's going to be, do you know, fun fact about the metallicity value in any render engines. While you can set this to something in between 0 and 1, it's not meant to be used that way, because in the PBR shading model, things are either metallic or they're not. So technically it's a Boolean value, or you're meant to use it as a Boolean, but render engines are okay with you having something that is 50% metallic. But in the real world, that's really not, doesn't really exist. It's like mixing ceramic and liquid metal together and then seeing if it cools down and makes some kind of magic property like kyanite. But so if you do use this, I was told, you know, it's either 0 or 1. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I never thought about this. You learn something new every day. And then a little bit of glossy roughness so that he's, you know, he's kind of, he looks like a polished chrome steel guy, and perhaps he is a little bit golden, perhaps, or rose gold, as I say, not pink, it's rose gold. Like so. Yeah, there we go. Tin Man. Ah, indeed, Go Miner. That's a really good question. You would essentially assure that the weight maps are painted out so that the pieces that are meant to be static, that not meant to flow with the body, you'll just paint those out. That's a kind of a clothing creator question. We may do that in the next Daz Plus stream. I'm keen to kind of expand this into how do we rig clothing and revisit that, especially with Genesis 9. And maybe on this occasion we can show you what were to happen if you had something that follows the bend and you kind of don't want to have that happen. So let me make a note of that, and we'll go and do that next time. Let's do that. So let's rig up this guy with the figure setup tool. So I've just imported him here. But that is not how you use the figure setup tool. Figure setup is something of a convenience tool in Daz Studio that lets you infer bones automatically from face groups. So I'm just checking here, we have all the ones that we saw in Blender, and that's all awesome. But the object that's in our scene now can't be used that way. So let me go and just make this guy invisible, and just remember, you know, these are the material adjustments that we've made here. So the figure setup tool looks really, really intimidating, and it's a separate tab that you can bring up by heading over to Window, Panes, and then it's this one here, the figure setup. You can also bring that up by right-clicking on any empty tab. You can left-click and drag that to dock that, or you can leave it floating around. It's a little bit wider than the other one, so I'm just going to go dock it here, and when we're done, we can close it down. So this is intimidating because it's kind of its own script there in a way. I'm going to leave the defaults here, triax weighted. I'll speak more about this in a moment, but in order to import our guy into this tool, this kind of standalone bolted on tool, we right click here and select add geometry, and then we need to go and find our object. So it's Tin Man in my case. Head over to open, and up comes the familiar dialog about the import size. So I'm going to use the mono scale so that my Blender model comes in correctly. Hit accept, and it's here. Notice there's nothing in the scene tab, and that's, you know, that's how it's meant to work. Open this up to see all your face groups, but of course they're currently in no relation to one another. So in order for Daz Studio to turn this into a figure, we can go and left click this top figure here, left click and drag that over to this word that says geometry none, because currently it doesn't have geometry. Let go of the left click, and Daz Studio will have all these face groups sorted out, and we'll have given them a bone each. But because Daz Studio doesn't really know what bone belongs with what, we need to tell it the hierarchy before the object is created. So at the bottom right here, there's a blue button that says create, and if I were to click that, then my Tin Man is going to be created out of the hierarchy that is now currently displayed as it is here. And you can see in the scene tab that this is in fact an object. It has a ton of bones, but they're all on the root level. So this is not what we need. The cool thing is we can go and delete that, go back to the figure setup tool, mess around with this, and then create the geometry again until we're happy with the object that we want to work with. And, you know, me not being an expert, I really appreciate that. So let's create that hierarchy then. So on the hip bone, this is essentially the root bone from which everything else should spring. So I can close that down. It has that that selection group here. I'll just close that down, so it makes that a little bit narrower, gives me a little mental breathing space to know what's what. The torso is going to be a child bone of the hip, so I'm going to go and left click and drag the torso onto the hip and just drop it there. And then you can see that the torso kind of moves onto the hip, and I can close it down so that, you know, tidies things up a little bit. Same with the head. Left click and drag the head over here. Now with the legs, it's a little different because we need to put the leg onto the hip, then we need to put the shin onto the leg, and then we need to put the foot onto the shin. So it's easiest to start at the outer end of that. So if we find the foot left, for example, or foot right, doesn't matter, either one will work. Do we have foot left? Foot left, there we go. So foot left goes onto shin left. Shin left goes onto leg left. That's its own hierarchy now. And then leg left goes onto the hip. That's that sorted. And same thing with the other side. So foot right onto shin right. Shin right onto leg right onto hip. Perfect. Getting less in the hierarchy tab here. Do you know what? Good point, Brian. The head isn't supposed to be on the hip. The head's supposed to be on the torso, isn't it? Haha. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Head needs to go on the torso. Very well spotted. Just checking if you're all awake out there. Good stuff. So, and same with the arms then. Let's go and put the left hand on the lower arm. It's actually misnamed here. It's called M rather than arm. The lower arm goes onto the upper arm left, and then that goes onto the hip. The poor guy has enough problems without me screwing up his rigging. I totally agree. Right, I remember that, Trevor. I do remember that episode. Was that the organic ship? Was that the one that was listening to Troy's brother? Was that it? I don't recall. Hey, I'm glad I can support the coffee economy. Enjoy the coffee sorts for two. It's not too late where you are for coffee, right? It's never too late for coffee. That's the one, right? Fantastic. Okay, so hand R goes on to lower arm. Whoop, dude. Hand R. So this is interesting here. Don't use the face group to move it around. That doesn't do anything. You have to use the actual bone here and put that onto lower arm. Lower arm goes to upper arm goes to hip. And then we're almost there. So the problem is if I just go and hit create now, which we can do thanks to the beauty of the figure setup tool. And if we go to our joint editor tool, I see that my bones are all kind of in a weird position, and they're all kind of there, but they're not really where I want them to be. And this is where this bone rotation is now important. So if I select one of these bones here, like that, for example, under parameters, under rotation, we don't really see X, Y, Z rotation anymore. They're now called twist, side, side, and bend. So this is what Biscuits meant with it's important what we assign. It's not so much for how the bones look in the scene, but it's also how functional this menu is. So a twist is literally it should be the head should twist, like side should be the head should go from there to there, and then I suppose bend is the head should do this. So let's see if we can work this out. The good thing is we can remove this object here, delete him, go back to figure setup, and then just take it one bone at a time and not be too intimidated, and put it into the scene until it's working basically. So let's start maybe with the name here. It's given it like Tin Man number 5 _ 344. It's maybe a little intimidating, so let's go and rename that. Just call it Tin Man number 5 on the name and the label, just for cosmetic purposes really. And let's start then with the head and the torso, probably also the hip. They are currently set to X, Y, Z, and I'm pretty sure we need Y to point up. So all of these, you can multi-select them, right-click on this, and we can say, well, let's try YXZ and see if that works. It could be YXZ, could be YZX. I'll say let's try the first one and then see what that comes up with. We do that, and lo and behold, that looks nice. So orientation is correct. Is twist the thing that's basically the next item on the menu? Is that what it is? It is. So twist is correct that way. Side is incorrect. Side and bend need to be the other way around. So this should be side, and this should be, this should be bend. Okay, so it's the other way around. This is good to know. It's kind of good to know. Let's go and delete this guy and try the other option, which is not YXZ, it's then YZX. Haha, knowing that now means just looking at what the bone does, it twists correctly, and then it goes and now bends correctly. Now it goes side. It does, doesn't it? Haha, perfect. So this is correct for the head. It is, of course, currently not correct for the legs and the feet and all. So let's go and work with that next. We did the same on this bone here. Just checking this bend, that side. Yep. Slightly difficult to see with my things, but that is definitely side. Cool. So then the legs, let's try the same thing on the legs and see how that works out. So once again, this guy can go. Thank you, Tin Man. Totally appreciate your buddy. It's on a left leg. In fact, both legs from here to there. Multi-select. Y, Z, X. Maybe, as if by magic, this works. Who knows? Great. So twist is correct. We know that. And then bend should go like this. Let's see if that works. Yes, perfect. And then side side should go to the outsides here. Yes, that also works. So perfect. It's the correct bone rotation for that. Arms. Let's see. So it's slightly easier to imagine it. Well, oh, and feet as well. Sorry. Let's go while we're on this subject. Let's do the feet. So the feet, they probably need to point into the Z direction first. So let's try with the feet first of all. And professional content creators know probably how this works. So a foot, that needs to start with a Z. So let's try ZXY. Pointing correctly. They do bend. Hey, that's more side side, isn't it? So that's incorrect. And then side side is there. This should be bend. And then twist is this. Yeah, twist is correct. So we guessed the twist correctly, but we didn't guess the other bone rotation correctly. So this needs to be ZYX. Good to make notes of this, you know. ZYX, perfect. That's that. And now the arms. The arms are a little bit easier to imagine if the guy would be in the T pose. So the A pose is literally the T pose with the arms bent down by 45 degrees. But with the rigging, we can only make the arms go either left, right, front, back, or top, bottom. So let's say it's an A pose, and then we'll just shift the positions. So I'm thinking that'll be X in the first position. Could be XYZ, could be XZY. Let's go and try. Well, we try XYZ, since that's already set up. Let's see what happens. So if you imagine this being rotated down, see what that does. So twist is certainly that. That is correct. Side, side could be correct. And bend is, that is actually correct. Ha! That is actually correct. That means we're good. So XYZ was indeed correct. Hey, that's awesome. That is awesome. All we need to do is put these into the correct position, and then we can get on with the weight maps and fill them, and then our guy should move. Oh, did I? Man, Brian, I'm so glad you're paying attention here. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're not good. God damn it, we're not good. Abort, abort. Fine, what would I do without you? Let's go and put the arms to the torso then. Ay, caramba. Arms to torso. What do I do with the legs? Are the legs? The left leg isn't actually attached to anything, is it? No, because they're on the hip, aren't they? Yeah, no, the legs are correct. Phew. Dang, I need that Tin Man ship. Has his hands, arms, legs, heads full. Thank you, Jeff. Totally appreciate it. Well, let's see if it works in principle. I mean, the good thing with the figure setup tool is you can always, once you've made that complex setup, you can always go back. And if you find something doesn't work out, like what we should check now, hip is here, check it out. Legs are coming from the hip. Torso is also coming from the hip. From the torso we have the head, and from the torso we also have the arms. And then hopefully we have the lower arm, and we have the hands. Good stuff. Did I do that with the other arm here? Also correct. Yes. And just to check, leg, shin, foot. Yes. Always good to double check. Leg, shin, foot. Perfect. All right. So let me go into front view. And let's assume this is all good. Let's just move these guys into position. So the arm bone kind of starts here. Ever so slightly difficult to grab a hold of that. And then it ends, it ends kind of here. Don't worry about where they're pointing right now. That's just something we can change in a second. Same thing with this guy. So I'll just line it up so that it starts at the top of my joint and the bottom thing is at the bottom. If you had an organic form that is a cohesive mesh, Daz Studio is actually clever enough to make these bones follow that shape, but because mine has lots of gaps in between, it can't do that, sadly. Like so. So there's an option while I'm here. This is with the bone editor selected here, the joint editor selected, there's edit object, adjust rigging to shape. So if you had something that's a proper model, not something that I've done in 5 minutes, something proper, then Daz Studio would be able to bend the bones so that they're basically inside the cohesive mesh. But I can't do this. I don't think this works. I can try. Yeah, it's not getting it. That's cool. That's okay. So, but what I can do is align these bones, these endpoints automatically. So I can go and say align, auto align node. Auto align all bones. There we go. That'll do the trick. So it'll then go and just at least follow that. It still doesn't help me because I need to go and move these things into position, but I don't have to worry about the exact kind of position of the joints, which is kind of handy. That goes here, that goes kind of there. I don't think we need to be all that precise. And then this can go here. And I'm sure there's also a way to mirror this from one side to the other. But again, I'm not an expert at this, but I'm hoping that this is going to give you a head start. So our bones are in place. Now comes a slightly more intricate issue that we need to talk about. And that is that currently my guy is triax weight mapped. And that means each bone, if I go to the weight mapping tool here on the tool settings, each bone has 3 weight maps. It has the X, Y, and Z rotational maps. And that can be useful in characters, especially if you have a cohesive mesh and you say, hey, when I do this joint rotation, I want the X weight map to look different than the Y weight map. I'd like for one to influence a lot and the other not at all or much, much less. So this is what that's useful for. But because to make it a little bit easier, I can convert this into a way that works like the, what's it called? The simpler weight mapping that we had before. And to do that, I can use the right click here on my character and say weight editing, weight conversion, convert triax weight to general weight. So triax 3 axis and general weight is just one map for all rotations. So let me do that. And then the whole figure has been converted to general weight maps, which we can see by the fact that we now have a general weights map attached on basically every joint, but we still have the triax maps. So you can either go and remove these separately, or once again with the right click on here, weight editing, and there's an option to clear weight, clear triax weight. And when you do that, all those triax maps disappear from the whole character. So, you know, to make it easier, if this was a proper character, it's actually a good idea to have the triax weights, but you know, it's just adds a layer of complexity we might not need. So with general weights selected, then we have automatically associated the bones with the face groups thanks to the figure setup tool, because it has inferred the bones from the weight map, so they're already cool. But if we wanted to check that, let's go into the joint editor tool and have a look here. So we see that lower left arm is lower left arm, leg right is leg right, and so forth. So figure setup tool has already done all this for us, so that's quite nice. Hence, we can proceed with the adjusting or filling in the weight maps manually. So with this here, weight editing, fill by bone selection groups, just like we talked about earlier. And now we have the weight maps in place where they need to be. So this means, hopefully, and aside from setting up all the limits, this means we should be able to go and do a bit of rotational magic here now. Is that correct? Yes! Oh my! This is insane. Let me go and save this before anything goes wrong, and then we go thoroughly test it. Is it already called? It's already called Tin Man, isn't it? Yeah, perfect. Just oversave it. Great. Oh yeah, actually, before I do anything else, let me go right click and say memorize figure rigging. There we go. So that's, you know, now I should go and save it and see if I can do some magic posing here with my guy. And this is rad awesome. Look at that. Now I can go pose the arm and maybe give him a kind of a jogging position here, and the hand. Oop, there we go. Do that with the other arm, like so. Hey, and we've made all this from scratch. I'm actually rather pleased. Is this cool or what? I'm enjoying it. This is good. You make things from scratch. And it's kind of the all these deep things that you usually don't have to deal with when you're a regular Daz Studio user, but then you've often wondered, how do they do that? We can. I think we can bend the whole. Whoops. Can we not bend the torso? Yes, we can. Look at that. Can bend the torso. Can even bend the head a little bit. Woohoo! This is great. Let's give the guy a face next with Substance Painter. Also very important. Let's go and grab this guy's material here. We've made such an effort. Yes. There we go. My man is running. And we can even animate him. That's very cool. So, you know, it'll be a little bit of work to go and to set up all the limits per joint. But if you had a custom figure, this is what you'd have to do. Isn't this cool? Perhaps they don't. It's a good point, Jeff. Maybe they don't. Let's fix that. Good point. I'm glad you're paying attention. We would probably do this, and then we do that. There. I mean, he's a Tin Man. For him, things might be possible. So funny. Yes, let's save it. Let's save it. This is awesome. Would you like me to give you all the scene files of today's session? Is that something that you could deal with to poke in? I mean, it's kind of nice to see how things are made. But I'm hoping I could give you a bit of an overview and a bit of a gist of what's possible, both with basic rigging as well as the figure setup tool. So again, there's like so much more work and so many more hidden tools, but you know, this is kind of fitted nicely into 2 hours. So much fun, right? I'm thinking it's just so cool to do something and totally make it from scratch. It's I'm currently learning how to model characters properly from a reference. So something low poly, but something also that you can use. So, you know, one of those things. If we name the bones the same as the Daz figure, can we use stock poses? Do you know? That is an interesting idea. I mean, you could potentially line him up. I mean, he is already lined up with the Daz figure. I don't know what happens if we just run the transfer utility on him. Do you know what? That is too cool an idea not to try. I'm thinking, let me go and save Tin Man, and like as extra bonus footage here, let's go and try that. Let's go and import Genesis devload, and we're going to go, and if we resize that figure correctly, that might just work. Let me go and export the whole Genesis figure out in Blender scale G9 base, just so that we have it, that I can model, that I can shrink my Tin Man to the same size so that the two 3D objects really overlap. Let's go and do that. So import, that is a great idea, Brian. Why don't we try that? It's super cool. OBJs, G9 base, scale, let's just see what happens. It's, you know, a little smaller. So with him then selected and us doing this through this 3D cursor, let's go and scale y'all down. And since I have modeled it per reference, they're more or less enough in the same position that the transfer utility might just work, Brian. So we'll disregard the vertex groups here. I don't think we're going to need them. Ha! Brian, I love crazy experiments like that. Let's go export Tin Man out again. Where did I put him here? Tin Man number 6, of course. It's going to be, you know, Tin Man number 6. Much cooler. Selected only. And we don't actually need vertex groups. I'll leave them in just because we can. Super exciting. Let's go and import Tin Man number 6 at Blender scale, so they should look the same here. Absolutely. And you know, while we're in the surface mood, let's go and paste that golden excitement color here. Maybe make that just visually just slightly different, because you know this is the improved version. So this is how you'd rig clothing. Essentially, you go right click on the scene tab. You have all Sunday. Excellent. Let's just keep going, Jeff. 24/7. Under assets, you pick the transfer utility. So the typical application here is you have an OBJ garment that's modeled around the Genesis figure, and you rig it this way so that it can follow the figure. Transfer utility. Here we go. With excitement, we say we can show options. We don't need to use any of these. Source figure is Genesis 9. This is our donor rig figure. Target figure, Tin Man number 6. And the projection template is something that's been introduced with Genesis 9. So here you can either use none, in which Daz Studio is going to try to follow just the shape as it is, but you can also use something like a dress, like a long dress, a short dress, a tight dress. You can use hair. So these are being expanded and they're available to everyone. And sometimes it's just easier to have a dress rigged with these templates. But in my case, this is pretty much, you know, bone for bone. So I'm not going to use a template, and I'll make sure we don't do anything rash here. Remove original target. I might not do that. Add smoothing modifier, we don't want to do that. Fit to source figure, we don't want to do that. Parent, we don't want to do that. Because it's not clothing, I'm just going to disable all these things. Hit accept, and it's done. So let's go and make our original Tin Man invisible. Make Genesis 9 invisible. And have a look at the implied rigging of Genesis, which follows the bone structure of Genesis 9. Oh my! This is rather cool, including facial expressions, by the way. So, oh, Brian, my God. Let's go to poses. by function jumping. Woohoo! Oh my dude. Okay, he distorts in places, but can we kneel? We can kneel. Oh my god, it's insane. Tin Man number 6, look at the feet and how they bend. This is even insaner, man. Running pose. There's me posing a running thing. And okay, I mean the head, you know, we need to talk about the weight maps, I guess, because this is kind of going along the lines of what was it Trevor said earlier? No, it wasn't Trevor. Somebody else who said you don't want certain things to distort. Like I don't want my head to distort. And that's a matter of adjusting or removing the weight maps from certain bones, that they basically don't distort certain things on your object. Look at that, including knees. Man, this is great. Well, leave that for another session, adjusting weight maps, because, you know, this is too exciting. Can you sit on a chair? Yeah, nice. This is interesting. Or on the floor. We can animate you as well. That is insane. Thinking about it. Do you know this also means the power pose templates will work, won't they? I think. Oh, let's go edit figure, restore figure pose. That'll bring him back into the A position. So the hat. Yeah, this is a great example of, whoops, where this bone distorts, or the weight map distorts geometry that we don't want it distorted. So we can just go and unpaint that out. He even has fingers and stuff like that. Man, this is exciting. So is there a bend version? I thought there was, maybe this isn't acknowledged exactly. Oh, maybe I need to select my Tin Man. What was I thinking? Whoops. Hey, this is awesome. This is awesome. Or not. But it works with poses. How exciting. The NFT idea, right? Tin Man doing the Naruto run. I love it. You can imagine animations and all that. I love it. Logan, I'm so glad you said that. I really appreciate all of you being here. I'm going to go and zip this all up, all the funky scene files that I've made. I'm going to go and turn them into a little Dropbox download that I'm going to add to the YouTube link of this session. So if you want to watch this on previous Daz Plus live streams, there is a forum link on the Daz Plus section. It's just called the Daz Plus stream archive. Click that. It's a whole list. I think we currently have close to 13-14 live streams that are just accessible for Daz Plus subscribers. You got to be logged into the forum, and you got to be a Daz Plus subscriber to get that access to the Daz Plus forum. Find the link and watch them all. We're also releasing them as clips, like way in the future, like next year. But yeah, that is the plan. My friends, thank you so much for being here. I've had a lot of fun. This was a rad idea to use the transfer utility on a Tin Man and have fun making your own bits and pieces. I'd love to see what you've come up with. So post them on social media. At me on Twitter. I'm at VerseLewis, and then that way I'll see them. I'm also on ArtStation. If you have anything exciting, just drop me a link on there. I always love to see what you guys come up with. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful Saturday. I will see you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.